It was a warm summer night in South London, and my two best friends, Sarah and Lucy, had come over for a sleepover at my house in Croydon. We had planned this sleepover for weeks, and were excited to catch up, play games, and stay up late chatting. As we settled into my room, chatting and giggling, I heard a loud knock coming from the attic. At first, I thought it might be just the wind, but the sound persisted, becoming increasingly loud and unnerving. Sarah and Lucy's expressions grew worried, and we decided to go investigate. I led the way up the creaky stairs to the attic, trying to calm my racing heart. The door was locked, and I fumbled with the key, finally managing to open it. We stepped inside, our flashlights sweeping the room. That's when we saw it. A knife was lying on the floor, its blade glinting in the dim light. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and my hand started shaking. I had never been one for horror movies, but this felt straight out of one. Sarah and Lucy were equally as frightened, and we huddled together, unsure of what to do next. We decided to call the police, who arrived quickly and took the knife as evidence. They searched the attic but found no one, and concluded that the knife must have been left behind by a previous owner of the house. Despite this, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The rest of the night was spent in a state of unease, our laughter and chatter replaced by nervous whispers. We tried to reassure each other that everything was okay, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. The police had assured us that there was no danger, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in the house. In the morning, we left the house, relieved to be out of the attic and back in the safety of the daylight. We tried to put the incident behind us, but it lingered in my mind, a reminder of the fear that had gripped us the night before. Looking back on that sleepover, I still can't shake the feeling of unease that came over us in the attic. It was a surreal experience, and one that I'll never forget. Although it may have been just a random occurrence, the memory of that knife on the floor and the sense of unease that came with it will stay with me for a long time. I had always been fascinated by the idea of spending a night alone in an old, creaky house, but I never thought it would turn out like this. My cousin Mike had come over for a sleepover, and we had planned to spend the night playing video games, telling ghost stories, and catching up on old times. Everything was going according to plan until we heard a loud, persistent knock on the door. My heart racing, I cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole, but all I could see was the outline of a masked man. Mike and I stumbled backwards in fear, bumping into the wall. We quickly called the police, who arrived within minutes and conducted a thorough search of the area. However, the masked man had vanished, leaving behind only a sense of unease. The rest of the night was filled with jolts and jumps at every little sound. We tried to distract ourselves by playing games and watching movies, but the fear lingered. I was grateful for Mike's company and for the police presence outside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. In the morning, we woke up to find that the masked man had still not returned. The police continued to patrol the area, but we decided to leave the house and go spend the day elsewhere. As we packed up our things and prepared to leave, I noticed something strange. There was a note on the floor by the door. He must have put it through the letterbox. In that note, written in a weird, unfamiliar script, it read, "I'll be watching you." Mike and I were both shaken by this development, but we tried to stay calm and carry on with our day. We spent the day exploring the city, trying to forget about the masked man and the note. But as the day went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. When we returned to the house that evening, the masked man was waiting for us on the porch. He was dressed in all black, and his face was still covered by a mask. We screamed and ran back to the police, who arrested him on the spot. It turned out that he was a notorious thief who had been targeting houses in the area. Looking back on that sleepover, I could hardly believe the events that took place. It was a wild ride filled with fear, excitement, and a dash of adrenaline. Despite the terrifying experiences we had, I'm grateful for the quick thinking of the police and for the unwavering support of my cousin Mike. It was a night that I'll never forget, and one that has left a lasting impression on me. It was supposed to be a carefree girls' night in with my close friends Regina, Ramina, Roxana, and Lee. We had all been looking forward to this sleepover in my small flat, catching up on each other's lives and watching some scary movies. However, our plans were derailed almost immediately when we began receiving prank calls and text messages with death threats. At first, we laughed it off, thinking it was just someone playing a cruel joke. But as the calls and texts persisted, the fear grew within us, and it became harder and harder to ignore that something was not right. As we settled down for the night, a loud knock on the door jolted us out of our nerves. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole, my heart racing with fear. When I opened the door, I was met with a terrifying sight, a bloody handprint smeared on the door. I stumbled backwards, slamming the door shut and bumping into the wall. My friends quickly gathered around me, and we decided to call the police. The police arrived quickly and conducted a thorough search of the area, but there was no sign of anyone suspicious. They took our statements into evidence, but without any leads, there was nothing more they could do. We were left to spend the rest of the night in a state of high alert, constantly checking the locks on the doors and windows and jumping at every little sound. The prank calls and texts continued, but we did our best to ignore them and stay calm. As the night wore on, the phone kept ringing with unknown numbers constantly calling. We eventually turned the phone off, hoping to get some much-needed rest. The next morning, we woke up exhausted and on edge, but with a sense of relief when the police called to say they had arrested someone in connection with the pranks and the threats. Although we were shaken by the events of the night, we were grateful to have each other for support and comfort. When I was 12 years old, I was yearning for a sleepover with my best friend Bobby. However, his mother wouldn't let him come to my house, but she agreed to let me spend the night at their place. Excited for the opportunity, I packed my overnight bag and headed over to Bobby's house. We were so excited, we stayed up late, played a bit of basketball in his yard, and ordered pizza. I even brought my Monopoly board, and we had a good game. We finished the night off by watching Home Alone and a few episodes of The Simpsons. We must have slept around 2 in the morning, but as I woke up in the middle of the night, I remember having this feeling of intense thirst. I stumbled out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, trying to avoid turning on any lights to not disturb anyone. When I finally reached the kitchen, I flipped on the light switch and my heart nearly stopped. A man towering over me was halfway through the window, and he was now looking directly at me. I froze in terror, but the man didn't waste any time. I screamed and ran back up the stairs to Bobby's mother's room, where I banged on the door frantically. Bobby woke up and came into the hallway, and finally, Bobby's mother opened the door. She looked past us, and we quickly turned around to see the man reaching the top of the stairs. With lightning speed, Bobby's mother locked the door, grabbed her gun from the closet, and called 911. She told the man, who was now rattling the door handle, that she had a gun and wouldn't hesitate to use it. The intruder finally backed off after she fired a warning shot. The police arrived shortly after and apprehended the intruder. It turned out he was a wanted criminal and had been on the run for weeks. I was lucky to have Bobby's mom, who was armed to chase off the criminal. Who knows what he would have done had he broken the door down. Ever since that day, my mom never let me stay at Bobby's, and Bobby was finally allowed to stay at mine. I was having a sleepover at my aunt's house with my best friends, Rachel and Sarah. We had known each other since we were kids and had been through everything together. That night, we were playing games, telling ghost stories, and eating junk food, just like we used to do when we were younger. The three of us were having so much fun that it felt like time had stood still. However, that peaceful evening was soon interrupted by a persistent knocking on the front door. At first, we thought it was just my aunt coming home early from her late shift, but when we went to answer the door, there was nobody there. We shrugged it off, thinking it was just a prank, and went back to our fun. But the knocking persisted, getting louder and more persistent with each passing moment. I started to feel uneasy and decided to check the windows to make sure that all the locks were secure. I double-checked the doors and made sure that the chain was fastened. I was starting to feel scared, but I didn't want to panic my friends, so I tried to remain calm and pretend like everything was okay. However, the knocking continued, and I could hear the sound of someone pacing back and forth outside the door. My heart was racing, and I was starting to feel like I was trapped. I couldn't understand why someone would be doing this to us. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't want to alarm my friends, so I decided to investigate. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole, but all I could see was a figure in the darkness. I couldn't make out any features, but I could tell that they were tall and broad-shouldered. I was terrified, but I knew that I had to do something. I gathered my courage and slowly opened the door, just a crack. I could hear the person on the other side, breathing heavily. I mustered up the courage to speak and asked, "Who is it?" But there was no response. I repeated the question, but again there was no response. Just then, the person pushed the door open and stepped into the light. I could finally see their face, and I was shocked to recognize them. It was an ex-boyfriend of mine, who I had broken up with a few months prior. He had been stalking me ever since, sending me letters and gifts, and showing up at my workplace. I was frozen with fear, and my ex-boyfriend started to speak. He rambled on about how much he loved me and how I was the only one for him. He said that he couldn't live without me and that he would do anything to have me back. I tried to remain calm and reasoned with him, telling him that I didn't feel the same way and that I just wanted to be left alone. But he wouldn't listen. He kept ranting and raving, his voice growing louder and more aggressive with each passing moment. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I tried to push past him and get back inside, but he grabbed me by the arm and wouldn't let go. That's when my friends stepped in. They had been listening from the other side of the door, and they knew that I was in trouble. Rachel grabbed the phone and called the police, while Sarah tried to talk my ex-boyfriend down. She told him that what he was doing was wrong and that he needed to leave. She was brave and assertive, and I was grateful for her help. Eventually, the police arrived, and my ex-boyfriend was taken into custody. The three of us were shaken and scared, but we were also relieved that it was finally over. The police officers took our statements and asked us questions about what had happened. They took photos of my bruises and wrote down the details of my ex-boyfriend's behavior. I never heard from him or seen him after that night. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed these stories. Comment down below if you have any ideas and stories yourself that you would like to share. We have more stories for you, so stay tuned.